Well, thanks very much, Gord, for that very kind introduction. As Gord said, I have a history in a number of different portfolios, most recently prior to Jobs, Tourism, and Innovation in forests. And so when you read my traditional resume, which fortunately Gord didn't, it talks a lot about logging and trucking and all those sorts of things. But I have to tell you, we wrote that for the forest portfolio. So it looked like I actually knew what I was doing when I went there. It really wasn't the case. My background is largely hospitality and tourism, and Jeff will tell you that. I've been a business owner in Prince George of a couple of restaurants for 24 years now. Been in the restaurant business for, I guess, 30, well, if you went back to, you could argue 1975, perhaps, but certainly you could argue 1979 that I've been in the restaurant industry. So for a long, long time. And it really is my passion, is the hospitality, the restaurant industry. And I think it's the type of business, and all of you will know this, that if you execute effectively, you can have incredible success and outcompete your neighbors. And that's really the theme of today's remarks, is the importance of us outcompeting the rest of the world, because that's what we are obliged to do if we're going to be successful. So what does a tourist do when they come to British Columbia? Well, they may do what I did last week, which is spent a week at Shawnigan Lake water skiing with my family, touring some of the wineries on Vancouver Island, going to some amazing restaurants over in the Shawnigan Cowichan area, and playing a little bit of golf, unsuccessfully, so I might add, at Arbutus Ridge. Some of those holes managed to take advantage of my lack of skill while I was out there. But on average, each one of those tourists spends about $300 a day, give or take. So our responsibility as government, as Tourism British Columbia, and eventually as a provincial destination marketing organization that will take over Tourism British Columbia, is to deliver those tourists here for the first time. But your responsibility as entrepreneurs is to make sure we bring them back a second time. And we all know that. Anyone that's been in the business for as long as I have, or others, know that the only way you do that is by effective execution. We rely on over 127,000 people to deliver services to our tourists across British Columbia. And it only takes one of those to not deliver the service in the way that that particular tourist expects, to send them home with a negative impression. And we all understand that. We've all seen that. So not only do we rely on each of our employees, but we rely on the employees of each of our respective businesses. And that's another key element, I believe, of our overall success, is developing a stronger workforce that can really support and deliver the level of service that we all expect. We have set an aggressive goal for ourselves, $18 billion by 2016 in overall revenues. We're at about $13.4 billion right now. I have been one that's been known to set aggressive goals. I believe that if you don't put a big target out in front of you and work hard, work aggressively, measure against that target, you can't possibly achieve that. And when you do set those goals, it's amazing what happens. And when you hold yourself to account for those goals, it's incredible what you can achieve when you work hard at them. And we've got some good success going for us already. Despite what's going on internationally right now, we're seeing very, very good growth from the Chinese market, very directly, 22% so far this year. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But a real surprise, and I'm so pleased to see some of our friends from Japan here today, is really good aggressive growth in the Japanese market, 21% year to date coming out of Japan. Even the United States is up 1.3%, and given the basket case that the United States economy is today, I'll take 1.3%. Overall, that gives us about a 2% growth as a market. But you know, it's a different business than it was when I started in it back in 1975 or 1979, depending on how you count that. It was so easy to market a restaurant back in those days. It was so easy to market the Vancouver Aquarium or a hotel or the Capilano Suspension Bridge or Grouse Mountain or Sun Peaks or Whistler, wherever you wanted to go. Because you had 2 or 3 TV stations, you had a couple of radio stations, there was no internet, there was a few newspapers. You could create brochures, put them out in the right areas across, whether it be BC or in different jurisdictions, and you could market that way. It was a no-brainer. It was easy for all of us. But today, how do you do that? How do you deliver that same message today in the world of cyberspace, where you have all the different technologies that Ian Black is so adept at and I am so incompetent at? And Ian will gladly tell you that's the case. But we need to figure out how we pull on those strings. And in my mind, It all comes down to the same thing that we've always relied on, which is building one customer at a time and word-of-mouth communication from one customer to the next. But maybe it's different now, because maybe that word-of-mouth is Twitter. Maybe it's Facebook. Maybe it's someone telling their friends that, wow, I just had an amazing experience this last week at Shawnigan Lake, and I'm going back there next year because it was so much fun, and we water skied, and we had a great time, and it was a family event, and it was what we did when I was a kid. It was the same kind of experience that we had, and it's different what each person wants and what they expect in their particular tourism-related experience. But using new technologies to reach out and capture that message from individual customers saying, here's what my personal experience was, and you should go try it. You know, in our restaurant business, I worked corporately for about 9 years before going on my own, and did a whole bunch of inspections. And those of you that work in franchises, I'm sure you know what that's all about. Someone shows up on your doorstep and pulls out a pad with reams of paper in and starts checking off all the things that you're doing well, and a few of the things maybe that you aren't doing well either. But I used to always say that you could tell when we used to rate our businesses as F, C, B, and A. I said, you know what? You know when you're an F, because when you're an F, when the customer leaves your business, they go away and they talk about how bad it was. In today's technology, they might even tweet about how bad it was, or they might go on Facebook, or they might use some of the other messaging systems to tell all of their friends how bad it was. A C is when that same customer comes into your business and leaves, and they have an experience that isn't compelling. It's not something that they want to share with anyone. They just think it was okay, but they're not going to go out and bother telling anyone about it. A B is when someone comes in and has that experience, and they feel so good about the experience that they had, they want to go out and share that with their friends. They want to go out and tell their friends, again, whether it be electronically or face-to-face, that this was a tremendous experience. We need to take advantage of that experience. And A is when it was so good that they left and they come back tomorrow with a friend. And we need to be an A in British Columbia. And each of us needs to be an A in British Columbia if we're going to compete with the countries across this world that believe that tourism is the economic development driver that will ensure their long-term stability as a country. And when you look across the world today, the complexion has changed dynamically. 25 years ago, when many of us started in this industry, there was about 10 countries that controlled over 90% of the total tourism business. Today, there are over 200 countries where tourism is one of their top 5 economic drivers, and one of the areas that they are focusing their efforts on to try and attract that customer in to the business. I was just in the Prince George Airport, unfortunately on a late flight, not an early flight, to get down here, and ran into a friend, a fellow that just lives up the street from me, and he and his wife are off to Africa for a 2.5-week safari right now. So we're competing against that safari. People that go to South America for tourism experiences, or New Zealand, or Australia, or China, or Japan, anywhere around the world, we're competing with all of those folks now. And it's a different world than it was 25 or 30 years ago, where our competition was very narrow, and it wasn't complex for us in terms of how we needed to deal with that. So that's where gaining the edge comes into play. Gordon was very generous to comment on my theme, which is focus, making sure that we stay focused on the things that we do really well. Many of you that have heard me speak in the past know that I am a passionate advocate for Jim Collins's work, Good to Great. I believe strongly that the themes, the messages that he has within that particular book are ones that can help build and support our tourism industry in British Columbia. It can work, I believe, virtually for any sector as long as it meets the test and criteria that Jim lays out in his book. And one of those keys is only try and participate in industries where you can outcompete the rest of the jurisdictions that come to play. And that's what gaining the edge is all about. It's focusing on 6 key themes, 6 key areas where I think we collectively believe we have a unique competitive advantage. And what are those? Well, for winter, it's pretty straightforward. It's about skiing and boarding, and there's about 6.3 million people a year go out at one of the 13 destination-ready resorts that we have around the province. We have incredible heli-skiing, the best in the world, thanks to Dave and Mike and others who present that tremendous experience that we have out there. And we're really the only ones in the world that can present that sort of heli-ski, CAD ski type opportunity. But we really can be the best in North America at a minimum, perhaps in the world at that, but we've got to compete with Colorado. And that means we have to work collectively as a team, and I want to talk a little bit about that later on. Convention is another huge opportunity for us with the tremendous facilities, and I'm going to take some time to talk about Pavco as well, because I think they've done a tremendous job, and I hope that some of your various hotels and restaurants and other venues are getting some of the benefit that comes with those individuals that come in. But then the other kind of summer-oriented key tourism opportunities for us really is what I call getting out and wandering around. Because if you look at some of the major new market opportunities, China and India in particular, what is it that those individuals are looking for? 1.4 billion people in China, 1.1 billion people in India. They are stacked on top of each other. They cannot move 15 centimeters without running into someone else. But we have this expansive space in British Columbia with just 4.5 million people and 100 million hectares of just absolutely unspoiled, spectacular terrain. And you can go from some of the finest facilities in British Columbia, some of the best hotels, some of the best restaurants, the best wineries, into the complete wilderness in a very graceful way in under 15 or 20 minutes. And that's really our unique marketing niche that we can go out and capture and sell to the world, not just to our traditional markets, Europe and the United States, particularly the Western Seaboard, Ontario, those key areas that we know always really enjoy their experience in British Columbia, but reaching out to that roughly 2.5 billion people, about 40% of the world's population in China and India, and start engaging with them and bringing them in. And I know many of your businesses are starting to see that. So that kind of breaks down into 4 sectors. Aboriginal tourism is a very fast-growing sector that is an area that, although people don't initially come to British Columbia for Aboriginal tourism experiences, they do generally have some sort of an Aboriginal tourism experience while they're here. And when we do exit surveys, they say, that's something I'll come back for. It's something I want to participate in next time. The artwork, the tremendous cuisine that's offered by some of the Aboriginal tourism experiences, the heritage, some of those sorts of experiences really play well into the international tourists' hands. Another key area is the city-stay experiences. You all know that. You deliver it well. It's the thing that makes Vancouver unique, just that tremendous city-stay experience where you can be kayaking in Burrard Inlet, having a fantastic meal at one of the great hotels down in the downtown core, taking in a hockey game or a football game, going up to Grouse Mountain, going over the Capilano Suspension Bridge, and most certainly going over, John, to the Vancouver Aquarium and enjoying that while they're there. I could never forget about you. So all of those sorts of experiences fall in the city-stay category. Ecotourism and adventure tourism is also key for us. Again, it fits into that wilderness experience. That's another key element that we need to build on. And then just the touring experience, people coming to British Columbia to wander around the tremendous federal park system as well as provincial park systems that we have in British Columbia. So those are kind of the 6 core areas that we think we have a competitive advantage in: skiing, convention, city stays, touring, Aboriginal tourism, and then ecotourism and adventure tourism. Those 6 areas are the things that we think we can build on. So we have pursued, as a start to that, a very aggressive ski campaign during the last ski season, 11-12. And I want to share with you some of the experiences that we had from that. Traditionally, we spend about $600,000 on our annual ski campaign. Last year, we spent $1.1 million. We thought it was worth giving it an additional push. And I think the early signals, certainly that we heard from Whistler Blackcomb, which is the flagship, the entity that we need to really focus our efforts on, I think at this point in time, are very, very good, and looking into the next season as being very positive as well. Once we fill that Whistler Blackcomb, we think we'll get a lot of spillover into the remaining 12 resorts, including Washington and places like Revelstoke and Fernie and all of the other great ski resorts that we have around the province. But the flagship, the one that's known internationally, is Whistler Blackcomb. Now, I have to admit, I am prejudiced. I have a place at Sun Peaks. That's where I ski all the time. So I'd like them to go. Actually, I'd like them to stay away, and then I get to continue to ski it empty all the time. But we know that we need to make sure that we manage and make effective use of the major resort that we have, which is Whistler Blackcomb. So we brought together individuals from the 13 destination resorts across the province last fall and asked them to help support the campaign that we would introduce for the winter of 2011 and 12. That worked very well. They did come back and said to us, we need to get in a little bit earlier and start developing the creative as well that goes into these campaigns. So we've done that this year, and I can tell you that we're already working on the winter campaign for 12-13. We're going to be going to the Toronto Ski Show, and for the first time ever, all of the different resorts that are going from British Columbia will be housed in one central location, and we will be the dominant player at the Toronto Ski Show. I'm going to attend this year. I think it's that important to go to that. I'm not a big fan of traveling when I don't have to, but I do think in this particular case it's worth the effort. And we're going to, again, lift our budget from the $600,000 that we spent 2 years ago to the $1.1 million that we spent this last year to $1.55 million, plus an additional $250,000 that we're going to be putting in for partnering dollars. So it will effectively have tripled our ski budget over the last 3 years, and we think we're going to see very, very positive results. We've expanded aggressively into both India and China. These are key markets. You will all know my passion and interest, particularly in the Chinese market. The Indian market has tremendous opportunities for us as well. And that has really allowed us to lever up the approved destination status the federal government achieved with both China Southern Airlines and Sichuan Airlines. We have about 300,000 seats a year now coming from China. That's up from 110,000 seats just a few years ago. And to put that in perspective, the UK generally sends about 1 million visitors per year. So as we see China continue to ramp up, I think within 3 or 4 years it's very realistic to be looking at that 1 million visitor mark, which will be a major player for us. Virgin Atlantic, of course, has been another key player, and I want to give credit to my colleague Rob Howard, who's the Minister of State responsible for Open Skies, who's been working very, very aggressively with the federal market, trying to get them to open the door up to more flights into British Columbia. So our spring-summer campaign for this year is something that I think is really, really neat, and perhaps it's just because I'm getting older and I've been thinking more about bucket lists lately than I did in the past. I'm sure all of us, as we get a little older, start, John, why are you smiling? I think John's got a big bucket list, right, John? We all have a bit of a bucket list. So last year, my wife and I were driving back from the Lower Mainland. I don't even remember exactly why we were down here, through the Fraser Canyon to Prince George. Now, I have, because of different jobs that I've held and places where I've lived, I have probably driven the Fraser Canyon, I'm guessing about 1,000 times. 800 for sure over the years is easy to get to that number, but possibly 1,000 times. So I know that canyon as well as anyone. And I have driven, if I've driven that canyon 1,000 times, I have driven by the Hell's Gate Air Tram 1,000 times without stopping. How many people in this room have stopped at the Hell's Gate Air Tram? Oh, we got a few. Good. Okay, great. So this particular visit, I thought to myself, you know what? We've got a little bit extra time. We're going to stop for lunch somewhere. Let's stop at the Hell's Gate Air Tram and go down and see what it's like. So we did that. My wife and I did that. And I thought to myself, how many places are there like this out there that none of us in British Columbia go and enjoy, that is just a tremendous experience, because it is a fantastic experience. If you haven't had the opportunity, I'm impressed at how many of you have done that. If you haven't had the opportunity, I encourage you to take the extra 15 minutes, which is what it will take over what a normal stop would be for you if you're going to stop for a meal somewhere on that trip, and go down and take a look. It is a world-class site that you do not want to miss. It is just a tremendous experience that is something that many of us just drive by on a regular basis. So I asked our Tourism BC folks to start thinking about a campaign that really focused on what is unique about British Columbia and what are the things that you should do before you leave this planet. So what are the things in British Columbia that you should be thinking about? And they came up with 100 of them, and they are spread right across this province. And some of them are really unique little things, like Liard Hot Springs up in the far northern part of the province, one of the most spectacular little ecosystems that you've ever seen in natural hot springs. Some of them are the things that you would expect, going over the Capilano Suspension Bridge, some of the golf and wine tasting, some of the tremendous city stay experiences that we have. But on that list, I guarantee you there's a bunch of stuff that you haven't done, and you need to do that. You need to get out and think about how can you share with your guests, with the people that you are bringing to British Columbia time after time after time and encouraging to stay here. How can you share with them those experiences that spread across this province, that they will go away and tell all their friends and tweet and do whatever it is that they're going to do to explain what a tremendous experience it is. Those are the types of things that I think can have a real significant impact on our ability. I want to move on and talk about something that we've been working very, very hard on for, I guess, probably 16 or 17 months, and that's the Provincial Destination Marketing Organization. This is a commitment that our Premier made, Christy Clark made during her campaign run to develop an industry-led, formula-funded model for a provincial destination marketing organization. That is easier said than done. And I want to give Dave Butler, who's been chairing the Provincial Destination Marketing Task Force on behalf of TIBC, a lot of credit for the work that he's done. And I think we're getting close to a model that makes sense. And it really has to, I think, be accountable. And it has to be accountable in two separate ways. And everyone, I'm sure, will agree with this. The first is it has to be accountable to the funder, which is, at the end of the day, the taxpayer. Because that's where the money for marketing, what you saw on the screens here, comes from. It's where the funding has come from for Tourism BC over the years. It's through a tax-based system that ultimately has to be held accountable back to the taxpayer. But just as importantly, we need to be accountable to the industry to make sure that we are delivering maximum value for every penny that is spent. So it is those dueling challenges of accountability back to the taxpayer and accountability to the industry that we need to balance and make sure that we get the right outcome. We are committed to moving forward very, very quickly on this over the next number of weeks. I expect that we'll have an interim board announced, perhaps not by the end of August. I know it won't be the end of August now, but early into September. We're focusing on bringing in some very, very credible professional individuals that people will be able to look at and say, we're confident that these people will deliver the initiative better than anyone else that we could possibly ask for, the type of names I'm sure that many of us could only really dream of, and it's taken some time to recruit those individuals. But I do want to give Dave and everyone in the task force a lot of credit because it's been a lot of work. I know a lot of people would have liked to have seen this move forward more quickly than it has, but we are committed to delivering it, and I know with the help of Dana Hayden, we're going to get there over the next very short period of time. I want to move on to just a couple of final topics. The first one is our labor market strategy, and this, for me, is probably more important than almost anything else. Because unless each of you has access to the quality of staff that you need to present the best possible offering to your guest, it's going to be impossible for us to be successful. There are 199 countries around the world that will eat our lunch, that will outperform us if we don't deliver the best possible experience that we can. And that's why we're partnering up with GoToBC. We've provided a small amount of funding, $115,000 roughly, to GoToBC to help develop the labor market strategy as we move forward. And it means tapping into perhaps some unusual areas of the labor market to make sure that we have high-quality individuals that allow us to deliver that guest experience in a way that our inbound tourists really expect and will go home and talk about. All of us, any of us that's been in the industry for any length of time knows that we're only as good as the worst staff person that we have on the floor. If the worst staff person that we have sends a bad or a negative message to our guests, that is what the guest thinks of our operation. And so developing good training programs, working with the Industry Training Authority, making sure that we have all that is required of us to have the best possible people trained and then managed by professionals like we have in this room, I think is absolutely key. So we have a good labor market partnership that we're working with GoToBC. It's really based on three key initiatives. First of all is looking regionally at each of the labor markets, because although there may be people available today in Terrace, British Columbia, that doesn't help Victoria, who has an unemployment rate of 5.3 or 5.4% right now. Doesn't help Fort St. John, that's at 3.2 or 3.3% unemployment. So we need to make sure that we know regionally the issues that we face in terms of the labor market. The second key area is we need to develop metrics and understand how we can measure our progress in this area. If we don't measure it, we're not going to be successful. I'm sure most of you would agree with that key theme. And then the third piece is we need to somehow send out a better message to people that the tourism industry is a great place to work. You know, as I worked my way through university, I had lots of different options to pursue lots of different ideas, but I saw tourism as the type of business that I could go into and really build a career around for myself personally, and that's what attracted me to it. And at the time, it was a very growing industry. It was a very growing business, the hospitality industry. So it was relatively easy to attract those very high-quality people. We need to find a way to make sure it's as exciting as it can possibly be, so that when we're recruiting on university and college campuses across British Columbia, we're bringing in absolutely the best individuals that we can, because that's what we need if we're going to be successful. We can't accept second best. So I think the go-to team will be very successful at that. We're going to need to work collaboratively over the coming months to make sure that we develop an appropriate strategy around this. I want to touch very quickly on the convention center because it's been an incredible success story, and often the success story doesn't necessarily get out there. I want to thank especially Dave Podmore, who I think was here today, although I don't see David right now. He's probably around. Who has been the chair of the PAVCO for the last number of years, about 5 years. He has just done a tremendous job leading that organization through both the construction of the Vancouver Convention Centre as well as the development at BC Place and the renovation project there. And Warren Buckley, who's decided to move on, but I want to give Warren a ton of credit for the work that he has done. He has been absolutely spectacular in providing us with the type of marketing initiatives that are required to really drive the convention center forward. In fiscal 2012, we had 58 major conventions, including 16,000 delegates at a single convention, the SIGGRAPH convention. The good news is they're coming back in 2014. And I think that's a real accomplishment and something that we need to thank all of the folks over at the convention center for, because when they deliver the level of service and SIGGRAPH signs back up that quickly to come back again, I think it sends a very positive signal. The Convention Center hosted a total of 667 events in 2012. Bookings are looking very good for this year, and we think that we're going to see very positive numbers into 2013 and 2014. The other side of that business that is also developing and growing is the cruise business. This year it's not a big year for us. We're up about 1.2%. But what's really exciting for us on the cruise business is the confirmed bookings for 2013 actually show about a 20% increase. So we think that that again is going to be a very, very positive sign for the industry. So I want to conclude with a couple of final thoughts. Because for me, this is not that complicated, but it is a lot of hard work. There is no simple answer to making sure that we have a world-class tourism industry. It takes every single person in this room, every single person at Tourism BC, every single individual at each one of your respective organizations to deliver a world-class experience for us to be successful. And it will really come down to something as simple as this. We will either outperform our competition or we'll fail. It'll be one of those two things. There isn't a magic bullet. The Magic Moments machine is great. It was a great initiative. I wish I had a machine like that could generate $18 billion in tourism revenues by 2016, but we don't. It will only happen if we focus our attention. So it's going to come down to a couple of key things. Let's make sure that we do what we do better than anyone else in the world. City-stay experiences, touring experiences, Aboriginal tourism, ecotourism, skiing, conventions. Let's make sure we are the first choice of everyone globally when they think about one of those 6 core areas and the experience that they want to have. And let's work collaboratively to develop a workforce that is second to none, that goes out there, that delivers the experience that we would all expect, that brings the customer back. So when the tweet goes out, or when the Facebook message goes out, it says, go to BC, because BC is spectacular and it delivers something that you've just got to see. So thank you very much for having me here today. It's an exciting time in the tourism industry. I'm very glad to be a small part of it. Thank you.